The bio here says that I guess you've sort of been out of the mainstream rock and roll fold for quite a while now. With this release of the Live Police album, I guess you have to start answering interviews as a member of the Police once again.
Yeah, I'm curious actually what the bio says about all that.
The bio only talks about what you've been doing since the Police, and it mentions absolutely nothing about so-called mainstream rock and roll work. It talks about you writing an opera. And,
okay, all right, okay. As long as it's got all that stuff.
Oh yeah, that's all covered here.
Okay.
So anyway, you have to, I guess, answer interviews as a member of the Police once more.
Okay.
Which must be a little bit easier.
Might have to go out and peroxide my hair.
and you have, I guess, about a dozen years of non-police work under your belt, so you can look at things from a fresh perspective now.
Right.
Is that the case? Is it something that you think much about, or is it all behind you and you want to keep it that way, or how?
The Police was the perfect experience of a rock group. Mm-hmm. We formed, starved for 2 or 3 years, and paid a respectable amount of dues. Then got a little bit famous, then got a little bit more famous, toured and toured and toured, and then got even more famous, and then got extremely famous, and then stayed extremely famous for a while, mm-hmm. and then broke up right when things were great. And it was fortunate that it didn't go down in flames. It was fortunate that it didn't whimper out with, starting to release substandard material. And so looking back on it, I regard it as the perfect band experience. And I don't think about it that much these days because obviously my life has moved on. I'm not a 20-year-old kid anymore trying to burn the world down, trying to make the world go down in flames. And so I don't think about it that much, but when I do, my heart is filled with fondness.
Okay.
I don't know how that translates, but
well, I think it depends on the way you phrase your heart is filled with fondness. There, it almost sounds a little bit sarcastic when you say it that way.
Well, no, it does. Yeah, I suppose it does. But I mean, it's true. I mean, I respect the work of my younger self, I suppose. Mm-hmm.
How about the box set? When the idea for that came around, was that kind of a pleasant surprise, or did you think it would take up your time, and it was not something you're particularly interested in?
Well, it didn't take up any of my time because the record company did it pretty much on its own, and the only time it took up was when I reading through the material and looking at the art, and was told that I better like it because it goes to print this afternoon. And it took me about 20 minutes of screaming and shouting at the record company saying it's not going into print until all three of us have looked at it, changed it, fucked with it, and like it. And so we had 24 hours to do that. And that's about all it took out of my life.
Well, that's interesting because, for a band of that stature, you would expect the members to be a bit more particular about what goes into a box set, but...
Well, absolutely. We were particular, but the record company just kind of snuck it past us.
Well, how are you satisfied with the finished product?
It could have been better. I'm not dissatisfied with it, though. I think the art is actually pretty good. The biography, I would have preferred to get... more literate, I don't know. It was okay. It was fine.
Mm-hmm. Our absent interviewer, Mr. Suzuki, was taking credit for this. He said the idea came from the Japanese side.
It's very possible.
Yeah, he apparently had broached the subject with the record company, and they asked for permission and things.
Well, let's not pop his bubble. He can go ahead and think. I mean, sure, he invented the concept of releasing box sets of of X groups.
Okay, we'll leave his bubble intact and move on to question 3 then.
Okay.
The live set that is coming out now, I guess, consists of 2 different periods in your police career. One being an Atlanta live set, and another taking place elsewhere.
Yeah, one is the early group arriving in America to conquer the continent, and 3 hungry guys bashing away, and it has kind of a raw energy. And the later album, we have the material has started to get stronger, and we've gotten a lot slicker. And the second LP of the set has more finesse.
So it's very.
I think the energy is still there, but there's kind of more finesse.
But I mean, I guess it's very representative of the 2 sides of the band: the raw naivete and the more experienced, slick later band.
Well, even back in the early days, in the 70s, when we were playing on the punk scene, we were always considered too technically proficient to be bona fide punks.
And that obviously made you stand out.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. At the time that you were known as one of the best bands at the time, but you never got around to releasing a live album. Was that always a regret on the part of the band?
Yes, it was. I mean, because I thought the band was much better live than it was in the studio, and I always thought that inevitably we'd record the material as soon as we heard it. I mean, whoever wrote the song would present the material. We'd rip it all up and organize it, arrange it, and figure out how to do it, and we'd record it that day. So there's kind of a spontaneity to the recordings. But after we went out on tour and played the songs night after night, they got slicker and slicker, and we found nuances that gave the material more meaning and so on. And by the end of a tour, we really had that material really well polished. And so I always thought the material was better expressed by the band on stage than in the studio.
Why did that never make the transition to vinyl while the band was still around?
Because while the band was still around, there was always the possibility of recording another studio album, which the record company and everybody prefers that. And also, when there's new material to do, we'd much rather concentrate on that, regardless of how well we're playing the old material. So it only really made sense after the band broke up. But then Sting has been so prolific, writing an album every year just about, that there hasn't been a gap in his schedule. We've been waiting for a gap in his busy schedule before releasing this police stuff.
Is that right?
Also, the other thing was that this hasn't been a problem for me, but I think for Sting, also a bit for Andy. Sting wanted to, the reason why he's more relaxed about it now is because he's won all kinds of Grammys on his own. He's sold millions of records on his own. He's proved that on his own he's a force to be reckoned with. So he's less touchy about the police coming along and blemishing his record. He's fought very hard to be Sting, not Sting, ex-singer of the Police. And he's finally achieved that now, and he's confident enough in that achievement to not be so hostile to releasing police material.
Is that right?
And reawakening the police dragon,
So you're saying he was threatened by the police for years then?
No, that's kind of a pejorative way of putting it. Because I actually appreciate, and we all were in the same predicament, and I appreciate his point there, which is that it's really hard to move on when you've been a member of a group like that, particularly for him, when it was his face and his voice and so on that was so much a part of the Police, that for him he really had to zig and zag very sharply to shake off that heat-seeking missile, which was his past, And so it's only that now that he's confidently that he's achieved that he can look more kindly on police stuff. When I say threatened, that's probably makes it seem more small-minded on his part than was actually the case.
Okay.
I mean, I think it was actually a respectable position that he took.
When the box set came out, apparently he did...
Say distracted rather than threatened.
Oh, distracted, okay, yeah. Well, when the box set came out, he did an interview with Q Magazine in which he said that he sort of pulled a power play in pulling the plug on the police, and that you and Andy seem to be a bit more interested in carrying on. Is that true in retrospect? Or?
It's certainly true. I don't know about Andy. Andy actually also has kind of a problem with the police. I don't. I'm the biggest fan within the group. I suppose maybe that's because I always considered it my personal achievement to have created the group. And even though Sting wrote the songs, and a lot of our success was dependent on Sting's contribution, I still very much identify with the group as my creation and everything. I found Sting and I put him in front of the microphone, so to speak, and so I have a lot of pride in what he's accomplished, even after the police, probably undeservedly. I don't get any credit for all. I didn't teach him how to write songs, but I mean, I still I have a very good feeling about the police, and always have, and I would have kept the police going. But as far as the power play goes, that isn't exactly what happened. We made a decision, Sting and I, one night coming home from a particularly good gig where our managers, or rather agent, had been talking about booking another tour and so on, and we had already decided that we had to go on a sabbatical, so that, because Sting and I both had different things we wanted to do, but it was very difficult because all the people around us were trying to close off all of our avenues of escape from the police so that the golden goose would carry on laying golden eggs. There was a huge corporation around the police. It was kind of like a gilded cage, and we finally realized that and it was only at a time when we were getting along really well and could discuss this kind of lucidly, that we realized that the only way we could move forward was to not just to sort of put the golden goose on hold, but to shoot the damn thing. And so we decided to break up formally. Strange thing, before the group broke up, everyone was saying, police splitting, rumors circulating, there we are denying it. No, we haven't broken up, Finally, we decided to break up. The next day, the rumors, police to reform.
There was quite a bit of talk about sort of a rancorous relationship between you and Sting, that things had really deteriorated to the point where you were almost coming to blows, or were coming to blows.
Well, we did come to blows, but only because we were such close friends, almost siblings, that we would have loud screaming matches. And when we came to blows, that was always in jest. That was always when we were in a cheerful, playful mood and, just scrabbling the way youngsters do. That was never in anger. There were a lot of angry moments, but the kind of angry moments that siblings have, you don't shout at your office workers nearly as much as you shout at your own brother, and that's sort of where it came from. Also, it made a good news story, and caused a lot of talk, and it was all kind of blown out of proportion, because we actually had very high regard for each other. We had our spats and so on, as every group does. And for some reason in our group, maybe we were less cagey about exposing this aspect of our band relationships. But I think it was kind of blown out of proportion.
So there's no lingering sense of bitterness?
Oh, none at all. None at all. We all actually get along really well, and we all have seen enough of life now to appreciate and acknowledge that we conquered the world together. We did some amazing shit together, and there will always be that bond between the three of us, even though our lives have, we've kind of spread out, as siblings do.
Question 6, it's said that the police was a clash of three different egos, and that as a result of that, there was always a...
I would say it was more of a harmonious symphony of three clashing egos.
and
That's a good quote, goddammit. I just made that up.
That's good.
It's the harmonious symphony of three clashing egos. Yeah, I like that.
That's the title of the album.
Yeah.
And that there was always a sort of overwhelming tension in the group. And
yeah, well, there was tension. We made it hot for each other.
You mean what?
We made it hot for each other, which kept the sparks flying.
But, so you fed on that tension as opposed to trying to escape it somehow.
Yes, it was. You know, we didn't get slack on with each other. If someone was sleepy during the show, we'd hurl abuse at them. If someone came in with material that wasn't up to scratch, you know, we would the scorn. You know, we made it hot for each other, which was good. You know, we weren't complacent.
And Sting has said that it said on your tom-tom, "Fuck off, you cunt," and that you were referring to him.
No, I wasn't. I was sitting at a sound check. This is a famous old anecdote, you know. So if I sound a bit rehearsed, it's because I've had to tell the story many times. And I was sitting there at a sound check with a felt tip. I'd been signing autographs or something like that, and sitting there with a felt tip in my hand. I was in a grump over something, and just wrote "fuck off, you cunt" on the tom-toms. You know, I actually doodle a lot because I enjoy the sensation of felt tip on paper, and in fact, the sensation of felt tip on plastic drumhead is very satisfying in a kind of tactile way. And I was just doodling, and the funny thing was that, you know, after the sound check, we go back to the dressing room, and we're in there, and the crew come in and say, Stewart, I mean, it's a disaster. Somebody's written something on your drums, but it's okay. We found the guy, we beat the crap out of him, and, you know, gosh, I mean, should we change the drum skins, and all this stuff? And, well, no, you know. And, in fact, it might have even been while we were in Japan. And so one of the Japanese crew gave Jeff Seitz, the drum tech, the Japanese translation. So in fact, I found these drum skins recently. Jeff saved them. And I've got them here with the "fuck off, you cunt" written with the Japanese version underneath. And we were all amused by the Japanese, you know, word for cunt. Was sort of visually onomatopoeic.
Sounds like it's going to go on the auction block at Sotheby's.
Yeah, well, I think they might actually.
No, you're going to have to help me out with question 8 here. It talks about how you deal with the...
So the answer to that question is no, it wasn't directed at... He likes to think so.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't. I think it was directed... It was definitely directed at myself as kind of self-provocation.
Ah, okay. That solves that. Question 8 talks about... asks about how you dealt with a physically tough guy like Sting.
How I dealt with a physically tough guy like Sting?
That's right.
Well, you see, I chop wood for a living in those days, and my job actually made me physically strong. Even though I'm sort of naturally not that gifted physically, I'm kind of a beanpole, but just fate had me playing drums for a living, which actually made me physically very strong. Also, when I was a kid, my brother Miles used to be a judo instructor, and not just judo, but all various kinds of martial arts.
Really?
This is way back in the early 60s, way before these things became fashionable. So, consequently, and he used to give lessons using my brother Ian and I as kind of dummies. So we actually had quite a lot of training in this sort of thing. So when it came to physical tussles between Sting and I, in spite of me being a beanpole and him being Adonis, I actually, just by a twist of fate, I suppose, ended up thrashing the little scumbag every time.
Okay,
I broke his rib one time.
Yeah, you really?
But we were just playing around. But of course, that was turned into the police fights are so violent that they're now breaking bones, you know.
Okay, the record shall show.
Yeah.
Get it on a more serious note. Question 9.
Sting was not hard to deal with physically at all. I mean, Jesus Christ, that was the least of our problems. I mean, he was a very volatile personality, and that was much more of a thing to deal with than physically.
In what way? I mean, why would have? Did he have up days and down days? Is that what you mean by volatile?
Yes, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
All verging on manic depressive.
So,
and he also went through a phase where he was doing a lot of acting, and the roles that he was looking at were all kind of demonic roles, and he got the idea for a while that he was the devil.
Uh-huh.
And so that caused a lot of hassle.
Meaning that you would have...
There he comes into the studio, the rest of us are trying to be decent, and we think of ourselves as decent people, but there's one guy who thinks he's the devil and wants to behave like that, you know, and, oh shit, I was too nice yesterday, and since I'm the devil, I have to be an asshole.
So, like, hurling abuse at people and...
Yeah, you know, also the pressures of group life, and mean that, and also the absence of the normal constraints on behavior, which apply to most people and don't apply to famous people or people who are too beloved by millions. Those constraints on behavior don't exist. You can be an asshole and still be loved and invited to parties, you know. So somebody with an idea that they are the devil, who doesn't have normal constraints on behavior, can be quite volatile and difficult to handle.
A handful.
Yeah.
The next question here talks about the end of the group and how perhaps you guys had always been aiming for sort of a world domination, and when that came with Synchronicity, the band had sort of, I guess, spent itself. It had come full circle or whatever, and had reached its objective. And that was
That's true. We had reached our objective. There was nobody left to impress, and we still enjoyed the music that we were making, but it's true that the group had achieved everything that a group can achieve, and that we'd climbed to the top of the mountain, and from up there we could see that there were other mountains to climb. So we had to climb back off that mountain to go start climbing those other mountains.
Question 9 here talks about how you are a multi-talented person, and yet you subordinated a lot of your other talents just to sort of fit in as a member of the group.
Well, those other talents were kind of unrealized at the time, and I was a starving musician, and I might have been a budding composer at the time, but in fact, the only thing that I could earn a living doing at that time was playing drums, and in fact, I had a hard time even doing that. But
gradually, I guess you just sort of found your niche within the group.
Well, I guess that question sort of answers some of the earlier things that we were talking about, which was that there were other things that we wanted to do which were just impossible within the context of the group, such as write symphonies in my case and act in movies in Sting's case.
Right. So your roles within the band, I guess, were pretty much self-defining.
Yeah.
And in that same Q interview, Sting was saying that how you started the band, but he eventually more or less hijacked it.
Yep. At the true.
First opportunity possible.
Yep, true. With my blessing, however.
Right.
Because he was writing really great songs, and it was always my problem at the beginning of the group to keep Sting in the group, because it wasn't the kind of group that he wanted to play in. He wanted to play sophisticated jazz in a sophisticated environment. And I was saying, no, let's go play for these wild-eyed kids. Let's play raging, thrashing, loud, obnoxious, hairy music. Because it's more fun and the audiences are more fun to play to, and well, it was always a struggle to keep Sting in the group. And when finally, the day he started writing, when Andy joined, and Sting was able to write songs that could finally be played by the guitarist, he began to be more interested in the group, and I began to breathe sighs of relief. And the more he took over the group and became involved with it, the more I could relax about holding on to him. Mm-hmm. So he actually did hijack the group, but with my blessing.
Mm-hmm. Question 10.
At first, mm-hmm. Later on, when we began to struggle over creative input to the group, and he moved beyond identifying with the group to the point where he wanted to make all the musical decisions and deny everybody else in the group any kind of musical input, then the struggles became more intense, and I became less relaxed. Maybe this
next question deals with that. You contributed to the compositional side with pieces such as On Any Other Day, Miss Gradenko, which our interviewer, Mr. Suzuki, quite liked as additions to the respective albums. However, word has it that Sting had wanted to give group credit for each of the compositions, whereas you and Andy wanted to keep things individual. Is that true?
I don't remember that coming up, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know quite where that would have come from.
Things were always...
No, there was never any argument there. Mm-hmm. In fact, I guess it was the other way around, that we agreed as a group that the material as appeared on the album was very different from the way it was presented to the group, with Sting strumming on a guitar, or in my case, me playing my home demos. So we felt probably more than Sting did that it was more a question of us participating in Sting's songs as contributors rather than Sting wanting to participate in our songs as a contributor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, no, I would say that wasn't an issue.
So you didn't ask for credit, or Sting didn't?
No,
or whatever.
No, that wasn't ever an issue.
Mm-hmm.
We all knew where the ideas came from, and there was never any argument about that.
Well, obviously, your contributions to the songs sort of completed them. Your drum work or Andy's.
Yeah, we made the arrangement. Every Breath You Take started out as he brought it to us as a piece basically on Hammond organ kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Andy came up with that distinctive guitar phrase, which really was very crucial to the song. So in many cases with all the different songs, things like that happened. The arrangements were a band thing.
Mm-hmm. So you just accepted that as part and parcel of your role in the band, and
yeah.
Okay. How have you felt about rock musicians? Have you did you at the time consider yourself a different breed of rock musician, or different from the rest of the field out there?
I'm afraid I am guilty of that arrogance, yes.
In what way?
Well, yes, I considered myself, and I'm sure the other two did as well, consider ourselves to be different from all the other musicians. Better, smarter, faster, cooler.
But I mean, isn't that the way just musicians tend to...
We're all like that. I mean, that's the concept that we were unique is absolutely ununique as a concept.
In fact, usually the way it works for a musician is the guy who's just a level below you is like, next to shit. He's worth nothing.
That's right.
But in your case...
And the guy the level above you doesn't deserve to be there.
But I guess in your case, maybe it was a little bit different. You knew you had...
Oh, in our case, it was true.
You knew you had more to bring to the table.
Well, yeah, we thought so.
But I mean, looking back in retrospect now, you've got a dozen years or so. I mean, how does it look now? What you did at the time?
Yeah, I would say that I would still say that we stood out from the other groups. Mainly, we existed in a time when musicianship was not a real high priority, when haircut was particularly important, and so on. And we actually were very proficient as players, as musicians, quite apart from the quality of the material that we were playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose that was, fairly unique at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was the high point of rock and roll musical proficiency was a period before the Police. The days of Cream and Jimi Hendrix, where musical proficiency, musical ability as players, as the virtuosity is the word I'm looking for, was highly regarded. That period suddenly came to an end in 1977 with the punks, where in fact virtuosity was deplored and decried as being irrelevant to true musical angst.
Mm-hmm.
But we always maintained that virtuosity, I think.
Mm-hmm. So when you first started out in the middle of the punk era, was there a game plan, a strategy?
Yes.
There was.
To take over the world.
That was always there. Huh?
That was always there.
Uh-huh. But I mean,
Well, no, the game plan, musically, it wasn't a musical game plan. Musically, we followed our instincts and played what turned us on, and so on. And we had the material, and we had each other, and with those things, we created the sound that we created. And that was entirely instinctive. Outside of the rehearsal room, in the light of day, thinking, how the hell are we going to make a living with this group? That was where the game plan came in. And the answer to the question, how are we going to make a living out of this group, was we kept our expenses down. There were only 3 of us. We did everything ourselves. I managed the group. In fact, I was the record company too. And we had no ties to the industry until the industry came to us and offered us, with no strings attached, a plank to walk, a launching pad to ascend. The game plan was to be streamlined, and to, when we went to America, we didn't wait for the record company to bring us over. We went over on our own steam and created our own market. The game plan was to not be beholden to anybody.
What about the manipulation of image, dyeing the hair blonde, and don't stand so close to me?
All that manipulation was came from the group. The only time when our image was manipulated by forces outside the group was when we came to America. The record company took off all the photographs on the back of the cover, which showed us all looking very peroxided and leathery and hostile. And the Sex Pistols had just come over to America and had popped the bubble of everyone hated them, and punk was a dirty word, and like the conditions which were so good for punk in England were adverse in America. So the record company cleaned up our image,
which was okay with you.
Which we didn't really think that much about. We thought it was kind of funny that we felt, we're too wild. They've had to clean us up. I mean, we didn't really care. We actually in those days didn't really care too much about the album covers and so on. From the point where the record company, we went with A&M, all of that packaging and stuff like that, went to them. Before that period, I was really obsessive about the artwork. I designed the first single sleeve by cutting pictures out of magazines and playing with a Xerox and the Letra set and so on. But then we were just too busy on the road so consequently, what I'm trying to get to is that we had some of the worst album sleeves in the history of rock and roll. And it's not our fault. The cool ones we take credit for them. The bad ones were someone else's fault.
Which were the cool ones?
Well, the cool ones were the single sleeves before A&M. I guess that's the cool one, singular, which was Fallout, which I designed.
Okay. And question 13, which is the next question to the end, asks about criticism at the time that you guys lacked passion, that you were performing reggae without the type of affection that one usually feels from reggae. Was that an issue at all at the time, or were you guys just sort of rolling along and not...
God, no one ever accused us of lacking passion. That's a new one on me.
Okay.
I never heard that criticism. We certainly were passionate. We certainly also came from a different place from where Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, Burning Spear et al. Came from. We came from London,
right,
as opposed to Jamaica. We were not suffering from racial discrimination. We were not suffering from the ghetto experience. We were broke, we were starving, we were struggling, we were pissed off, we were passionate about our music, but we physically came from a different place from those reggae artists. That's true. But I think, no, I can't imagine how anyone would ever say that the Police lacked passion. We were very passionate.
And I guess actually you ended up sort of infusing reggae with a new sort of feel, new sort of attention for it.
Well, I guess so, yeah.
Last question. Excuse me here. I got this. Yeah, this is about what you've been doing recently. Mr. Suzuki is a big fan of your drumming, and he says that I guess you appeared on Deborah Holland's latest release.
Yes.
And there's also the CD version of Clark Kent's collected works.
So that's released in Japan, is it?
Apparently.
Oh, cool.
And Eddie Vedder was involved in recording with you?
No. He came to a show that I did with the Seattle Symphony, and we talk on the telephone occasionally.
Oh, I guess it just says he was involved in the recording of that album somehow?
No.
Okay, well that's straighten that out. So what exactly are you involved in now? I guess that's the gist of this question.
Right this particular moment, I am finishing an album that I recorded with the Albany Symphony Orchestra. Next month I start a movie, and then the month after that I do another movie. Then the month after that I go to England to play polo, and the month after that I do another movie. And the album that I'm working on right now is extremely, extremely cool. It's a symphonic album with me flailing away on the drums. It's not classical music. I guess it's almost like rock sensibilities, but executed by an orchestra rather than a guitarist and bass player. It's, I guess, rock music without the guitar, but with a full symphony orchestra.
Is that something that you can commercially get away with?
No. I have been up that mountain of commercial success. I am now independent from a need for commercial success. I have my day job scoring films, which is work that I very much love to do, and which pays for the maintenance of my studio, staff, and lifestyle. This album is a labor of love, and I don't need to sell huge copies to pay for it. I'm producing it myself in my own studio and so on. The musicians were very expensive because there are a lot of them, but I'll get away with it. I don't need to be in the charts anymore, and I'm sure that this album will not be in the charts. It's unique. There's no niche for it. There's no radio stations playing this kind of thing. It's utterly and totally unique album. We've had 30 years of rock and roll. Just about everything that you can say in rock and roll has been said. Just about. Actually, in the last 6 months, there's been a new genre, or there's been a new bouquet of groups which are actually very interesting and exciting and have managed to push the frontiers back a little bit just when it looked like they couldn't go back any further. New ways that have been found. nevertheless, I'm having a terrific time exploring new territory, and I have no expectation of, instant commercial success with it, or any commercial success with it. But I guess I've got my own loyal following who has supported my weird stuff all this time. The concerts that I've played with different orchestras, operas that I've written for different companies and so on. I guess I've built up my own limited following, which is enough to sustain me.
And
I guess it's an attitude that's very similar to our attitude with the police, which was that it doesn't matter how many people appreciate what we do; it's the intensity of their appreciation.
So you can,
and I don't care if zillions of people get it, as long as those people who do get it get a serious buzz from it.
So your intention is just to put it out on the table, and whoever wants to grab it can grab it.
Yeah.
You're not going to say it's the greatest album of our time, or...
Well, of course it is the greatest album of our time. It may not be the greatest seller of our time.
Who are these bands you were referring to?
It definitely is the greatest album of all time. It absolutely is the coolest record ever made. And it's utterly different from everything else. And it'll probably take years for it to spread around the world, but who cares? It's a very cool record.
Just one technical point. Which bands were you referring to when you said in the last 6 months there are bands pushing back the borders?
Oh, P.J. Harvey, Portishead, Tricky. Who else is there? Bomb the Bass have been around for a while, but they've suddenly gotten more interesting than they were. Even Sinead O'Connor, even though she's not exactly new and fresh, she's actually going into some really interesting places. Kind of a combination of techno with a visceral element.
Okay, Stewart Copeland, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your interest. I hope you got a story.
Yeah. Well, good luck, and hope to see you sometime in the future.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.